Now, what happens to a lot of people during the winter is their hair gets all messed up, it becomes like dehydrated, dry, frizzy, split ends. You start losing your hair. The hair becomes dull. So I'm going to give you some tips on what to do about this. The real question is why? Well, there's 3 reasons, and we're going to go right through them. The first reason is the obvious reason, which is low vitamin D because of the sun. There's no sun, so we're not going to get vitamin D. So unless you take vitamin D, you're going to be usually vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D directly helps you grow hair. So if you're deficient, you may have hair loss. Now, the second reason is actually quite interesting. When you're deficient in vitamin D, you have this alteration and change in your microbiome. Your microbiome are dependent on your levels of vitamin D. And the type of microbiome that I'm talking about are the ones that help you make B vitamins that are necessary to build hair. And we're talking about B2, B3, B6, vitamin B5, and biotin. And so without biotin, your hair is going to be very fragile. It's going to break. It's going to be very thin and dried out. So by adding more vitamin D, the microbiome becomes more balanced and you generate more of these B vitamins. So you can take B vitamins from Nutritional Yeast, or you can take vitamin D so your microbes can make more B vitamins. All right, the second reason. During the winter months, people typically don't eat as many vegetables, okay? And the vegetables that they're eating are pretty much empty of nutrients because there's a very big difference when you're growing vegetables during the winter months versus during the summer months, especially when people have their own gardens or they're going to the farmer's market and they're getting nutrient-dense vegetables versus at the store, whether they're growing them hydroponically. I just noticed even the taste of vegetables during the winter are definitely void of a lot of flavor, which means they're also void of nutrients. So the combination of not eating enough and then having them nutrient deficient is going to show up in your hair. So we're going to have less vitamin C. Vitamin C is necessary to build collagen. Well, guess what your hair is made out of? Collagen. And the other nutrient that's very, very important for hair growth is magnesium. A lot of the magnesium comes from the chlorophyll, the green of the plant, which is in a lot of vegetables. So less vegetables, less magnesium, more susceptibility for hair loss. And then another nutrient that's in vegetables is vitamin E, especially in salads. If you're deficient in vitamin E, you can definitely have more hair loss as well as more dryness because the hair needs that oil in the glands to produce a nice texture in the hair. Now, the other thing that's interesting, and people don't consider this a nutrient, phytonutrients give your hair and your skin and your body amazing health benefits. So if you're consuming less phytonutrients, that can show up in your hair. All right, number 3, during the winter months, I know this might be shocking, but some people, or most people, eat more junk food. That's right, I know you're shocked. And so more junk food deprives you of nutrients. And now you start developing what's called subclinical nutrient deficiencies, where you might not have major nutrient deficiencies, they're subclinical. So you might not notice these symptoms, but they show up in other subtle ways. Now, this research was done by Professor Ames, and he came up with this theory called the triage theory, which I think it's not a theory, I think it's absolutely true, which describes subclinical vitamin and nutrient deficiencies being rationed out for more immediate survival purposes. So let me give you an example with selenium. Let's say you have a subclinical deficiency with selenium, and say you don't have enough to provide for all the different functions of the body. So instead of using selenium to prevent hair loss, the body's going to use it for more critical purposes like fertility and reproduction. So if your body is deficient in a certain nutrient, it's not going to allocate that to maybe long-term maintenance of different body functions, or it might not allocate that for longevity purposes or to prevent chronic disease. Instead, it might allocate it for short-term survival mechanisms that help you cope, but don't really help you survive in the long term. So this is an interesting topic because a lot of times people take vitamins, and if they don't feel an immediate result, they might stop taking them, not realizing that you need these nutrients for long-term survival and to prevent a lot of chronic illnesses. I mean, let's just take magnesium, for example. It's needed in over 300 different enzymes. Let's take vitamin D, for example. A huge part of our genome is dependent on vitamin D. And so if someone is just focused on vitamin D for preventing osteoporosis, they're not looking at the hundreds of other purposes of vitamin D. So I have additional information on this, but the point is that when you consume junk foods, you worsen these subclinical deficiencies, and it could definitely show up in hair loss. So the combination of low vitamin D, not consuming enough of nutrient-dense foods, and eating junk foods can all worsen your hair during the winter. So what can we do? Number one, take more vitamin D. Number two, eat more vegetables. I would recommend eating more Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are loaded with sulfur. Sulfur is great for hair. Sulfur is also good to help you make amino acids, which are the protein building blocks for all proteins, including your hair. I would beef up, no pun intended, your salads. I would start to eat more avocados and bell peppers, which are loaded with vitamin C. You can also add nutritional yeast to get all your B vitamins. But of course, if you're taking enough vitamin D, that's going to help your microbiome. And then seafood can help provide for all the trace minerals like selenium, zinc, iodine, iron, manganese, as well as the